So, as a person who never reached diamonds in solo duo queue, I managed to reach diamonds as an ADC main last season. So, I want to basically share what I learned throughout the grind and hope you guys find something useful here. So, this is my OP.GGs, and at the moment I'm sitting at Emerald 3, which is basically just diamond from last season. And I only play ADCs, but also kill as a support as well, just in case if I get autofill or something. When you look at look at my champion pools, you can see that I'm actually playing so much different characters, and yeah, which is like kind of bad because you really want to limit your champion pool size as much as possible, pretty much like around only 10, or the best is like 3 to 4. But because I've been playing so much different characters, that's why it actually takes me around 300 to 400 caps, yeah, 400 to get to diamonds. I'm also quite a KTA players as well. That's why my stat looks pretty good, but it all depends on how you play the games. And yeah, every game is different, so you don't want to focus on KTA too much. So yeah, when it comes to climbing the ladder, you really want to try to focus on like playing characters that is actually good in that matter, because in my opinions I feel like ADC is quite reliant on meta. So for example, if we look at these characters here, I have really good win rate and KDs. That's mainly because I play them when they are the strongest in those meta. For example, there is Yumi meta where you basically auto win if you just pick Sari. Jinx was really good before the mythic items release. So I also play a lot when Jinx is really good. But after the change, I haven't played Jinx that much lately. I've been playing Misfortune and Ash mainly because they are basically the tier 1 ADCs at that moment, and they're actually pretty simple to play as well. So that's why I play them a lot and can just play her into a lot of different team comps as well. So yeah, I don't actually like one-shot king that much, even though one-shot king is not a bad thing, especially when you try to get to a higher rank and stuff. But then in bot lane, it's really easy to get counter and have a rough time in lane. So I really recommend to stick with at least 3 or at most like 5 characters if you can, so you can be more flexible when it comes to like counters into different matchup and stuff. So when it comes to like draft picking, a lot of people might not really like care about this too much, but then usually I will like to have the bottom 3 in terms of pick orders, because when it comes to like picking the right ADCs for different situations, you really want to know what kind of team calls you have and team calls of the enemy, so you can pick a good counter or like have a better laning phase overall. So in some situations that unfortunately you are the first pick of the game and no one's fought with you as well, because that happens a lot in solo queue, you really want to just pick like a safe pick basically, or just blind pick your main ADC that you use the most. Make sure you just pick something you're comfortable with, or go for safe picks like Ash or Silver, where you can just play into any different kinds of situations without getting bullied in lane, basically, in like bad matchups and stuff. So ideally, you really want to let your support pick first, in terms of pick orders, because you really want to pick something that strategize with your support really well instead of just picking anything that you like to play, and that will actually make your game easier, I guess. So when it comes to banning champions, I also prefer to just ban any champions that you really don't want to see in your games. I don't recommend banning ADCs too much, because even if the ADCs is like an OP pick, you can still get countered by a good support pick. I mean, it's just a personal preference really. So if you want to, you can always ban ADC for sure. But I just prefer banning support or any champions from other roles that I don't want to face them, especially like junglers like Kane. Is a really annoying junglers, because you can just get one shot by him all the time. Also like Beast Crank, Master Yi, stuff like that, or Seraph, because poking champions just hard to deal with most of the time in lane, especially when they have a lot of abilities to harass you when you try to CS and stuff. So that's why I really like to just ban some poke champions or poke support in generals. So now we talk about the ADC counter matchups and stuff. Basically, I made myself this chart. It's kind of beneficial because I can just look at those and pick my champions really quickly. You can just like take a screenshot of this if you want to. It might not be the most accurate and most updated, but then I also spend like a few hours to look at different guides and stats and stuff. So this is like, I would say like 80% accuracy when it comes to like ADC counter matchups and stuff. So the golden ones are champions that you can basically pick most of the time, because those have really good range and escapes and stuff. But I personally don't recommend picking Aswell that much, because Aswell is more like a difficult champions to play actually. When I play Aswell, I don't actually find too much success on myself as well. So even though it's the best safe pick in general, but I only recommend Aswell if you actually main him. I actually like Silver a lot, because if you play against like double mage with a lot of pokes and stuff, you can just wave clear really quickly and have a spell shield to block some of the abilities and give you easier time in lane basically. So move on to the blue ones. They are blind pickable but more situational, I would say. So here's how you use this counter chat. So this bigger icon here is the champions that get countered by the smaller icons champions. So like as we get countered by Yasuo or Dravens and stuff. When it comes to like draft picking, if the enemy team pick the ADCs, let's say like Caitlyn, then you can just pick any of the champions on the right, like Jinx and Ashe and stuff. These 6 champions are quite good against Caitlyn. Like it gives you an early advantage if you just pick the right champions into them. So apart from the ADC counter chat, I also have an ADC duo chat, just in case if you are duoing with a friend or you just want to play some characters that strategize well with your support, then you can look at this chat here. This chat also work for any support mains, because if you are a support main, then you can just look at which ADCs you are playing with and pick a support that works well with them. One thing about picking champions for solo queue is that most of the time you really want to avoid playing like champions with short auto range like Kaiser, Vayne, Layla, things like that, unless you are like really good with them or dueling with someone. Because if you don't have an even matchup in lane and you get counterpicked, then you will have an extremely tough time in early laning phase, and you will be most likely useless late game. So it's just more like a thing that you really want to consider when you try to pick a champion to main for solo queuing. So when it comes to like building items for your games, I think most of the time people might just follow the build path on things like op.gg or something. And technically they are the most popular builds for sure. But then some of the games are more situational that you just cannot buy all the same items every time. There's autopilot. So when you buy your items, especially from your first items and stuff, you really want to think about like the enemy teams and how to counter them with your items. So most of the time, the core items, the first two items are unchanged. Like you can just follow the guides and stuff with those. But then when it comes to the third items, if the enemy teams have some really strong tanks like Scion or Cho'Gath Malphite, stuff like that, which will be extremely tanky during mid game and late game, you really want to build LDR like right after IE and stuff. So at least you will have the abilities to deal with tanks mid game. Otherwise, if you build attack speed instead, if you have these three items, you will basically do nothing to the tanks because they are too tanky for you. You have no penetration at all, only just straight AD and attack speed, and that's all. So you really want to think about armor penetration items earlier if there's too much tanks. There's also some situations where the enemy team have a really strong carries or like full AD teams or full AP teams. Then you might need to consider about building some defensive items, stuff like Renduins to let you like reduce the chance of you getting burst down by AD assassins and stuff. So if the enemy teams is like full AD, then you can build this or like have a really strong assassins or a lot of gap closings basically. Then this is kind of good as well. If they are like full AP, then you can build this, which give you MR and a shield if you take magic damage, which is really good if you are against like magic casters and stuff. You can also build things like Force of Nature or like all this, like items that with HP and magic resist at the same time. So it just increase the chance of you surviving. One item that I actually don't see people build a lot is this. Personally, I actually kind of like this item because this is situationally good when there's like one enemy being really fat. Then you can just build this. Maybe like there's like a 10-0 set or something, then you can buy this thing and use the active on the set. So you will basically have 30% damage reductions on him, which is really good to clutch the game. And if he can just one shot you most of the time, this is really good if you don't have clans and there's a lot of CC, then you can build this. But most of the time, if you have clans, you don't really need this unless they just have so many CC and some unique CC that even clans cannot work with, like Malzahar's OT or Mordekaiser's OT. GA is really good as well against like assassins and stuff that will gap codes on you. But personally, I don't actually build GA that much, mainly because if you get burst down with GA and your teammates cannot follow up to cover you, or you are the last one surviving, then this is kind of useless. So personally, I like to build other defensive item instead of GA. But if there's just too much enemies focusing on you, then GA would be a really good option. So Mortal Reminder is really good as well against champions that have a lot of healings like Windows and stuff. But you cannot I think you cannot build this and this together, these two armor penetration items. So these items is more situational since there isn't that much champions have strong healings unless you're playing against like a really fat Yasuo or a really fat Samira stuff who use Bloodthirster or things like that, you know. So yeah, when you try to build around the games, you really want to make sure you think about what items you want to build and not just copying builds for every games. So when it comes to summon spells, most of the time you can just default with heal and flash. Flash is almost a must on ADC because it allows you to get out from different kinds of situations, maybe like enemies engage on you basically. And heal is like a good one because it also heals your duo, so you will be using heal quite a lot as well. But you can also pick goals if you don't like taking heal, because goals allows you to kite around fights really well. Or you can take exhaust as well if your support is taking ignite or heal, because exhaust is really good against ADC that have to gap close on you or any sort of assassins from mid lane or jungles, but only take exhaust if your support is not taking exhaust, because double exhaust is not that good, especially if you guys exhaust on the same target, then it will be a waste. Barrier is not too bad, but I feel like the other options would be better because you can basically use barrier against burst damage, but barrier is just useful in some scenario when the enemy engage on you. So it's better to just use heal or ghost to position away from the fight if you need to. Teleport is only good with some ADCs that has really good wave clear, Ezreal or Six. These two champions works really well with teleport since you don't really need other spells that much when you're playing these two champions. Cleanse is a big one that a lot of people forget about. Cleanse is really good when the enemy team have a lot of CC, such as like Ash, Arrow, and like Sejuani, OT or something like that. So if you see the enemy team have at least like more than 2 champions with a lot of CCs, then you really want to take this. This can also cleanse, ignite, and exhaust. So that's why it's really good with ADCs that try to engage a lot as well. Moving on to some useful keybind that I have been using as an ADC. The first one is attack move. It's basically how you press A and you can see your auto range here. Then you can just left click on your enemy to auto. This is actually a really good keybind to use instead of just like use your right click on your enemies, because this will decrease the chance that you misclick on the ground and just walk to the enemies for no reason. One other thing you can do with this is that you can basically just click on the ground instead of the enemy if they are not in range. Then your characters will automatically just walk in range to attack your enemy. And this is the attack move button. If you are interested, it's in hotkey and then player movement. Then you can just change it over here if you want to. Also with players attack move click is a different settings. If you do shift click, which is my settings, it will target the closest enemies in your range. So talking about the shift click keybind, it's actually really beneficial for Kalista especially, because Kalista has the unique auto passive where you have to jump around right after like every auto attacks actually. So with the button attack move click, you can just like hold shift and then just click around the map, so you can just auto attack around the characters without any problem, and you can kite with it quite easily as well. So one other settings I want to talk about is actually this auto attack thingy at the gameplay sections. This is actually a really good settings to have it on, because what happens is that most of the time, if you stand in bushes, you might not know if the enemy have any features on you. But then if you have auto attack on and you move into the bushes and stand still without pressing S, your character will actually start auto attacking the enemies or like minions as well, basically. So it actually tells you that the enemy have vision on you in this bush, which is extremely beneficial. So there's actually more I can talk about, like going in depth in the ADC counter chat or stuff. But seems like the video is going on a bit too long, and it could be like quite boring to watch this. So I might leave it for next time if anyone is interested. And hope you guys can get the rankings that you want. So good luck with the grind and see you next time.